Hello, I am Matty Dalrymple, and welcome to my interview series From Expertise to Authority, where I talk with people who have succeeded in building their professional expertise into authority for a sideline or second act. And you can find out more at theindieauthor.com/authority, and that's indie with a Y, where you'll also find links to my Substack, my YouTube channel, my From Expertise to Authority podcast, and a downloadable worksheet you can use to track your own journey. And today, my guest is Mike Kuczala. Hey, Mike, how are you doing?
Oh, good, Maddie. Thank you. I'm doing great. How are you this evening?
I'm doing well, and it's always a pleasure to speak with you. And just to give our audience a little bit of background on you, Mike Kuczala has delivered keynotes and presentations, facilitated professional development, and has taught graduate courses on 4 continents. His content has reached more than 200,000 teachers, trainers, corporate executives, and parents, and his upcoming 5th book focuses on the brain-body connection in early childhood. And Mike was my guest over at the Indie Author podcast, where we were talking about the brain-body connection in adults. And that was in episode 129, Moving for Creativity. And so I love to talk with people who have made this transition from expertise to authority. And I like to start out asking, Mike, describe what your first or main career or the position was where you started building up the expertise that eventually led you to a position of authority.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question because I come from a family of teachers and I was in the classroom for 10 years, and a good percentage of teachers have second jobs, whether it be on the weekends, sometimes the evenings, in the summers, and I was no different. In fact, all these years later, I still have a second thing that I'm still doing. So that necessitated several different things that has a second income. And then eventually I teach a little bit more background. A teacher needs graduate courses and to move over on their salary guide. And so when I moved back to Pennsylvania from Colorado, I was doing the same thing. I was taking courses and fell in love with a company called Regional Training Center to take those graduate courses. And loved them so much. Eventually, I went to teach them part-time. And that's where it all started, by teaching these graduate courses part-time. And my initial training was in brain compatible methods, which pretty much led to everything else that I've done. I'm a brain nerd. I love it. There was a point in time where I just couldn't get enough of the research, and I read and read and read. And so that's how it started with RTC and with teaching graduate courses for RTC.
So that's interesting. Would you define your expertise as being teaching or as being more focused on this brain compatible methods concept? Or is it the fact that you can combine those two things that's your area of expertise?
You hit it on the head with the number three. Combine those two things. So the way the graduate courses used to be set up, because we were all face to face at one point in time. Now everything is either like this, what we call a live virtual experience, or it's online. The pandemic really changed a lot, but it was all face to face. They were intensive weekends, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, weekend off, Saturday, Sunday, and you were in front of people all the time. And I did a lot of work to make sure that I was prepared to do that, because there's a first time for everything. And there was my first graduate course, and I prepped and prepped and prepped and prepped and read, etc. Because you're with people, and those Saturday and Sundays are like 8 to 5. And so you're in front of a group. So I was teaching. Didn't know it at the time, but I was honing my presentation skills and my love of speaking and being in front of people, being in front of groups. And at the same time, the topic was brain compatible teaching and learning. So I tried to, get as much information around that on top of the training that I had already done. I was becoming very familiar with our text and the research that supported it, and then was able to teach it at the same time, which was really, really great, and started me in a direction that I never thought I would go.
So when you started expanding into presenting, did you just see that as another, I shouldn't say just, did you see that as another channel for teaching? Or did you feel like you were expanding into yet another area of expertise because maybe presenting was quite different than teaching, required a different skill set or whatever that would be?
Yeah, I mean, it was more about teaching at the time, but I also decided that I wanted to be a good presenter. So all these things were happening side by side. So I was, I think coming from a family of teachers, it's natural for me, and it's natural for a lot of my family members. And so that part was great. But now when you're in front of a group for 7, 8 hours in a day, you need to become a very skilled presenter, and you need to be able to manage a group, not use verbal graffiti all day long, and speak appropriately, and speak in an expert fashion. And so the teaching really morphed into this presentation. And to this day, I still feel like I'm teaching, but I'm also very aware of my presentation skills. I feel like if it's like a day long professional development, it's more teaching. If I'm doing a keynote at a convention, then it's more like presenting. Like, you better be on, your skill set better be good, your language is good, your audience is having fun, you're managing their state. There's a lot of movement in what I do. So it becomes both at the same time. And sometimes it's separate depending on the audience I'm in front of.
This isn't so specific to expertise and authority, but I'm just curious, do you have a preferred audience size? Like, do you like speaking to a big room? Do you like speaking to a more intimate crowd?
I It's funny. It's a funny question because I think about this. I prefer a big room. Like, if the room is full, I'm happy. If the auditorium is full, I know there's people that have, speak in front of tens of thousands of people. I think my biggest audience was probably right around 1,000 people in the Philippines. And I really enjoy a big group. Now, that doesn't mean all those graduate courses I taught, which was about 75, 80 over a very short period of time, which was, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. That was a smaller group. So that's okay too. When I do professional development in schools, those are generally 100 people or less. And that's fine. That's fine as well. But when I can get the big group, dare I say it, it feeds my ego. And it's just fun for me because a lot of the stuff that we do, if you're in one of my keynotes, you're never seated for more than 5 or 7 minutes. And I know with a larger group how some of these activities are going to play out, and it's fun.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I think when a lot of people are looking for a way to establish themselves as an authority and they're thinking through their options, like writing a book, writing articles, doing speaking, people might select speaking as an avenue without then thinking through those other layers. Like, do you want to be going for the big group events or like maybe the small intimate workshop events? Do you want to be going for live events or do you want to be going for virtual events? So it's just another layer of all the many, many paths people can take. It's another preference you can pursue depending on what your goals are. So I did want to talk a little bit about what your goals were. Like, it sounds like to begin with, your goal was to earn extra income because that was necessitated by the situation you found yourself in. Did that continue being sort of the driving goal? Did other goals supersede that at different points in this journey?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I said I didn't like earning money to do these things. And that's really what started it. When I saw what was available to be made, and I had a young family, that was the driver. And even till this day, it is in part a driver. But what happened over time was that I was coming across this research and this information, and I saw people were having fun in what I was doing. And I really wanted to get the information out to teachers. And, my second book was written for corporate executives. So to them or to parents, just to let them know how different a career you could have as a teacher, as a corporate trainer, by doing these things. And so that was important to me. So that also became a driver. So this want to make more money landed to me here. And I was like, oh, and then it just kind of goes hand in hand through the years as I was doing more and more work. Yes, there was income with that, but I was also helping people to live better professional lives through the work that I was doing. And that was pretty exciting.
And that shift in audiences is also interesting that you started, started with a focus on teachers and expanded from there. Do I understand that part of your resume correctly?
Yes, it's still mostly focused on teachers. I did write that second book for corporate trainers and for the corporate world, and so I'd done some work in the corporate world as well. I don't do as much of that, but I did expand upon that. But still, the main focus is teachers and administrators. I've done workshops for parent groups, local community things. I've spoken at the local library here in our area. So I've had some different audiences, but by and large, I still work with teachers.
And what led you from the initial focus on teachers to the book that was focused on the corporate world?
Yeah. So the gentleman that wrote the forward for my second book, he was in one of my workshops, and he was the head of HR of a global law firm, huge, one of the largest law firms in the world. And it was his vision that the work that I did was really important. He kind of swung me in the direction of corporate training and thought, well, law firms. And I actually did a presentation at his law firm and banks. And he just thought that with the right direction and support that I could get into a more corporate setting. And I'm happy to present to anybody because, when you're training or you're teaching, I mean, two different words, two different worlds, but they really are the same thing. And so when people are training in a corporate setting, they need to know best practice as to how people learn best. And that is through understanding the brain. Sometimes it's through using movement. Those types of things were of interest to me to share with corporate trainers.
Well, the whole idea of like, I know you best from our conversation about moving for creativity and an ongoing emphasis on the importance of movement in everybody's lives. And that's a great basis for expertise because there's really no one that doesn't apply to. And so if you were invited to talk to a group of truckers or something like that, then you would have something valuable to say to them too.
I had a session I did last year for a local company who were plumbers. And it was I also have a background in wellness. And my fourth book was called The Peak Performing Teacher, Five Habits for Success. And those principles apply to everyone. It could be the peak performing plumber, it could be the peak performing truck driver or whatever. And so I worked with them, and all these plumbers were sitting in front of me meditating, and it was great. And I loved it. Anytime I can help people with some little twists, little tweaks that can help them live a more full life and a better life, I'm all for it and happy to work with any group.
The other thing that's making me think of is the idea that I think a lot of advice, certainly my advice in certain circumstances, is the importance of niching down when you're thinking about your audience. And I think that there are two approaches to it. One is that you can niche down on the audience. So, for example, my target audience for from expertise to authority is senior people who are later in their careers after a long, successful professional career. And now they want to use the expertise they've developed maybe in a different format. So that eliminates some audiences that would be interested in what you have to teach. But you sort of taken the definition, you've niched down on the topic rather than niching down on the audience. You have identified a quite a specialized topic of expertise that's nicely generalizable to many, many different groups.
Yes. And that's what makes it great. It's just for everybody. And I do those keynotes fairly often, peak performing teacher keynotes. And it's just all about what you're not doing during the workday. It's about how do you show up to be your best self. And I really enjoy helping people through that process. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's combating that my expertise is for everyone. Like if I had expertise, so I have expertise in indie publishing and I could hang out my shingle and say I'm the indie publishing expert, but that's such a hugely broad topic that how much of an expert can one really be in it? But if it's
Right.
indie publishing as one channel in an outreach strategy for senior professionals, then, you know, then I can really dive deeply into what that topic is, which makes me think of another thing you were talking about, which is this idea of mentorship. So the person that had given you the entree to speak to this group of lawyers, it, it doesn't sound like that was a mentorship that you were seeking. It was kind of one that came your way serendipitously. Is that true?
You know what, Maddie? Most of my career has happened this way. And that's really interesting because it's difficult to nail down. I'm not sure. I guess it's possible, but someone coming up, I don't know that the same path would be available, similar ones, but just having that opportunity. I didn't look for any of this. I didn't know I was going to teach graduate courses, and that was the biggest teacher. I mean, I know people have poked holes in a 10,000 hour theory, but I think about the Beatles, all that they did in the very early, I'm not comparing myself to the Beatles. All they did in their early years, they just played and played and played and played every night, all night long, all the time. That's how I felt as a graduate course instructor. So the more success I had, the better I got at it, then the more success I had. And I just kept putting the next foot forward and following the doors that opened. I'm a goal setter. I believe in that. At the same time, for these big things that happened in my life, I didn't set out specific goals. The opportunities just kept coming. I took the courses. I liked them. I taught the courses. And then we designed courses. My co-designer and co-author for my first two of my first three books, Tracy Langel. And then we said, hey, why are we using someone else's book? There was another opportunity I didn't plan it for. I was like, you know what? You're right. Let's click. And then even this fifth book, I wasn't planning on writing it. And it was too good of an opportunity. I was asked by the publishing house, and the people that got involved with it are brilliant and dynamic, and I just couldn't turn it down. So I just kept going, kept going, kept going, not always with a clear path in mind, sometimes, but it was more serendipitous.
Yeah. I think that's very interesting because as I started trying to really crystallize what I wanted to say about moving from expertise to authority, I was writing Substack articles, which will eventually become the basis of a book. And one of those articles was about how I serendipitously benefited from a relationship with Writer's Digest magazine, starting with a particular article. I asked a colleague for an introduction to the editor in chief. I had an article placed sometime after that introduction, and that led to speaking at their conference and doing webinars for them, judging a contest for them, acting as a connector for Writer's Digest with people in the indie author community. And sort of my punchline of the article, so to speak, was I did this kind of by accident, but you can do it more intentionally. But it's very interesting that you're kind of saying the same thing. Like it came your way without you necessarily pursuing those particular outcomes. But do you think that there was anything that you did to sort of pave the way for those serendipitous opportunities to come your way?
Oh yeah, you show up 100%. You just keep showing up, and you're going to make mistakes, and there's going to be failure. And nobody wanted my book at first till I found the right home for it. And my editor to this day, she's not my editor anymore, but she said I had to give a body part to get this book published because the concept is really before its time. Like we were answering questions before people knew what questions to ask. And so it did well for them. It did well for me. And I just kept showing up. I just kept leaning in, and you're going to have failures. You're going to hit walls. You might be scared of what people think of your failures and how you're going about it, but you just have to keep walking through it. And that's the serendipitous part then shows up. And there's been times I get kicked back in my lane. Okay, Mike, yeah, this is what you really are good at. So let's stick to this. And it's not that it's always not intentional. Like the Peak Performing Teacher book, that was intentional. And one of my three publishing houses, they have enough faith in me that, hey, I want to do this project. They liked it. I wanted to do that. I mapped that out. I had all this graduate coursework sitting that should be in a book. And that's how that book came to be. So as you get to become more of an expert, yeah, I think then it becomes more intentional. But this latest book, the serendipitous part, Teachers College Press at Columbia University called me because of all the body of work, and they were able to find me and look at me and see what I was doing, and they were interested in what I was doing. And one more serendipitous thing, one thing all just led to another. A big turning point in my life as well. We used to have an instructor, we still do have an instructor meeting, but we had it in a large room together with Regional Training Center. And 2 years in a row, we brought in someone at the time. Her name was Jean Blades Madigan. It's now Jean Moyes. And she became an absolute, just great friend and mentor through this whole movement and kinesthetic classroom thing. And to this day, we still talk. And it was fantastic. I saw her present. That was it. I mean, I was already doing the graduate courses, but I was like, wow, I love that. And without that job, without that moment, I didn't recommend her. Someone else did. I was like, who is this? And then it just took off from there.
The idea of showing up being such an important aspect of all this, I think is so important. And as I was working on this Substack article about what had happened for me as a result of getting that first Writer's Digest article published, it was, I mean, the whole basis of the article is there was this path that I was treading that I didn't see until I looked back, that I could see how one thing connected to the next. And as I was writing the article, I was thinking like, oh yeah, there was that introduction I got. And oh yeah, there was this like other
Mhm.
connection that I didn't see that led from one thing to the other. And, it's great if you're somebody who can put together the 15-step project plan for getting to where you want to go. But I think that's going to be the rare person, and that just showing up is probably like in some ways better advice. And I'm wondering if when you see people that you feel are probably trying to pursue a position of authority, what mistakes do you see them making that eliminate the benefit of the just showing up as an enabler of the serendipitous outcomes?
Yeah, if I had a, well, that's an exaggeration, I guess, but I've been asked a lot about writing because I'm just a regular guy. And so people see me and say, well, if he can do it, I can do it too. And when I start to outline the process for them, it's not just I want to write the book and send it. You have to go in and do a prospectus. In some cases, might not need to find an agent, etc. And that stops people in their tracks. That's the part about showing up and leading in, like to walk through that process. It all looks like, hey, here's my new book. But to get to that point was I mean, to get to this point now with this new book that's coming out in February, decades. I wouldn't have been ready before. And it took
Yeah.
building a reputation and building relationships and serendipitously having someone call and say, would you like to do a TEDx talk? That was a huge part for my career. And I just happened to meet this guy at a conference at Harvard, but you have to be at Harvard. Like you have to show up, you have to go do it. And then once you get past all of it, yeah, when you look back, it's easier to say, yeah, I met this person, I had this conversation, I saw this person, I was influenced by this person. But going forward, it's just about keep going through the process and love Tony Robbins' quote, success leaves clues. If there's something you want to do, don't reinvent the wheel. You're going to put your own personality into it. You're going to tweak it, but find out how someone else got to that level of success and copy them. It's a pretty simple plan. If
Yeah.
willing to stick with it.
What your story about the getting the book published reminds me of is doing a podcast. So when I wanted to establish myself as an authority in podcasting for authors, I wrote the book. And one of the things I did is included a list of, like, in the early chapters, it was basically like, do you really want to do this? And one of the things I did is I listed my, like, here are the 68 tasks I do for every podcast episode, because I do think that people would read that. And for some people, it's going to be like, whoa, no, I didn't realize. Or they might read it and say, well, I don't want to do that, but I see a different way I could approach podcasts. Or that's all she does. Like, I want to do something much more refined. But just what you're saying, that understanding the mechanics, both sort of the philosophical way of achieving what you want to do, but also the mechanics of achieving what you want to do.
Yeah, both. You got to have the philosophy, but then, yeah, and it's like with goal setting. So if plan A doesn't work, which is, you need to have a plan of action and then compare it to your outcomes. If it's not working, you got to change to plan B. And if you're willing to go through C, D, E, F, G, all the way past the end of the alphabet, well, then you might achieve success. Maybe you'll achieve it sooner, but you have to have a plan in place for some things, and you need check whether or not it's working, and then change what you're doing to get to that end spot. Stephen Covey talked about, begin with the end in mind. And to get there, you have to change. You have to lean in. You got to keep going to get where you're going. And I did, well, maybe you're going to ask about this, but not always feeling like an authority. I think that prevents people from moving forward too.
They'll talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was terrified of it when I was teaching those early graduate courses. Like, who are these? I'm now a graduate instructor that was trained to do so. It was intense training, but who am I? Like, why should these people listen to me? I had all those feelings. But then as I did the next one and the next one and the next one, I was like, yeah, I'm pretty good at this. And people are learning, they're having a good time, which are two fundamentals to learning. We need to be emotionally engaged and seeing it as a good time. And then it just kept getting easier and easier, to the point where one day, just like in my little niche world, in my brain, it's not like I'm some global authority on this huge topic. It's movement in the classroom, but I'm like one of those people that someone in Europe will call to be part of this team to talk to, or that a publisher will call. So I'm comfortable with me being the expert in the room now. Not exactly sure when it happened, probably sometime after the first book, but it keeps getting more and more refined.
Well, I keep hearing things that are markers. Like if somebody calls you and asks you to do a TEDx talk, that is definitely a marker that you've achieved authority. So, and it sounds like there were a number of those kinds of moments along the way that made you realize you had achieved that position.
Yeah, there were. At the same time, though, like I just want to reiterate to anyone listening, it wasn't always that way. I questioned myself a lot, but I just kept working and kept working and kept working. At that time, because I would come home, I had this little family that I needed to provide for and support, and I just kept going, and eventually became more and more expert. Taught a greater range of graduate courses, wrote on different topics, presented on different topics, and here we are today.
I wanted to step back for just a second to something you had said earlier about the fact that you were a little early in your, um, I gathered that was in sort of recognize the importance between brain health and movement. Am I right in understanding that that's what you were referring to when you said that? Actually, let me reframe the question, because I think that the underlying question is, if early on in the exercising of your area of expertise, whatever that is, and you were getting pushback because in your case you were sort of too early with that message.
Gotcha.
So there are two ways that somebody could address that. It's like, I'm early, I need to like lay more foundation, I need to wait a little bit, whatever that might be. And then the other one might be, I'm just wrong. Like, I've come up with some kooky idea, and in a year and 5 years and 10 years, no matter how much work I do, this is never gonna pan out. Do you feel like there was something you can look back on and say, "This is what convinced me that I could pursue this and eventually it would pan out," versus, "This is just something that's never gonna have legs?"
Yeah. So the teaching graduate course number one to graduate course number two, I can't remember most of my courses I taught, but I remember that first one. And it was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and it was good. It went well, but my score was more average. Every one of our instructors are evaluated. I was no different back then. And so I wanted to improve. And if the next one would have been abysmal, got worse, I'm not good at this, probably would have ended things right there. But I just worked my butt off. And I said to myself, I will never, ever, ever not be ready for a question, for an activity to be facilitated properly, to engage the audience in a manner that was smooth and seamless. I just worked at it, practiced my language, spoke my language, read, looked at research, wanted to become more and more an expert. And so that's what happened. And I guess that's where kind of the leaning in and the determination came in. And I got better improved. And then I created this level of teaching graduate courses all the time. It really never dropped after that. And yeah. And so now the big difference, you hear me talking extensively about prep. And if someone said, Mike, would you come and do a half day or come do a keynote? Like, can you be here in an hour? I would say yes, because I can do that now. There's so much in this brain, but it took a long time for it to get there. So there were some moments early on that could have ended it, fortunately, it kept pushing it forward.
So I have two more questions for you. One is sort of looking back, and that is, what is something that you wish you had known at the start of your development of expertise that you feel like would have paved the way more quickly to a position of authority for you?
Mm. So it's something I would have known that would have pushed me more quickly into that position. I think, yeah, well, let me turn that around. If I would have known how much work it was going to be, I'm glad I was excited about the next opportunity. Let me put it that way, because I think about all the work I've done up until this point, and it's a lot. And if someone said, "Hey, you need to do this, 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 and this," but so I'm glad I really didn't know that. Is there something else that I would think about that I wish I had known? Probably some of the marketing that goes into it wasn't always my strong suit, because I had that. Well, who are they to listen to me? And so now I have no problem with that. So I think the marketing side of it and the comfort with that and putting myself out there, and I don't know, taking a few more chances. I think maybe that would be it.
Well, I do think that that idea of marketing being finding the people who can benefit from what you know and making them aware of what you have to offer is much more appealing on both sides of the transaction than buy my stuff. And that it's just
Yeah.
natural that the longer one proceeds along their path in expertise building, the more confident you are and the more you understand, oh, it's this niche audience that's going to benefit more so than this niche audience, or it's this message that really resonates with the big groups more so than this message. And so that I think that's I mean, in some cases that's hard for everybody throughout their careers, but I think it's especially a challenge at the beginning because you might start out without any experience of seeing what the benefit is materializing for the people that you want to reach.
Right. You just don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And it's really been a great process. And there's still more. I mean, I think I'm kind of in the last act, but there's definitely still more. And so I'll probably learn some new lessons and wish I had applied them earlier. I mean, we're in this generation of AI and different ways of reaching audiences. And I have a foot in it. Of course, I'm paying attention, but probably not as much as a 27-year-old.
Well, you sort of anticipated my last question, which is what is your next step? Do you have like a concrete thing that even though you have achieved this very impressive level of authority, do you see yourself moving on to even greater authority, or do you feel like you're kind of wrapping things up and maybe you're going to move on to something else entirely?
That's a great question. I don't know. I mean, this book is coming out in literally 6, 7 weeks, and it's taking up a lot of my brain space. So I don't know that I have anything planned beyond that. I just want to do more of the work that I've been doing. And I think each book that comes along provides an opportunity to do that. Like, you reach new audiences. I have a new marketing team at this new publishing house, and I'll reach a different audience than the other publishers. And so I'm always looking for opportunities to teach and present. So at this time, really not too lofty. I mean, in my day job, I've had a new position where I'm running the company that I went to work for all those years ago, teaching graduate courses. So that takes up a lot of my time as CEO. And so I'm trying to be better at that, frankly, because that is a really new thing for me. And it's different than teaching, and it's been a huge learning curve over the last year and a half. So that combined, making sure the company's taken care of and the consulting work is taken care of, and always looking for new opportunities. That's kind of the the next step that I see until maybe something just shows up.
Well, it is interesting that you can't think of it as a career that you become more and more and more experienced and authoritative in. There are all these parallel tracks, some of which are going steadily up, some of which are have a check in line. That even someone who's established a lot of expertise in one area, maybe has established themselves as an authority in that area, then they move into a different area, as you're saying, with your role as CEO. And now this is you're earlier on that track than you are in some of the other professional perspectives.
Yes, absolutely. Fortunately, there's been a lot of help around. At my age and the point in my career, having that new completely change roles has been really nice, actually. And that might be a reason to keep looking for new things to do. I feel like it's kept me on my toes and got me out of a little bit of a rut. And so there's lots of new in my life at my age, which is a good thing. So yeah, one foot in front of the other. The woman who has also been an educational mentor, who owns the company that I am CEO of. She always said, you just keep putting one foot in front of the other and you keep taking steps until it doesn't work anymore or it comes to fruition. And I've really lived by that for a long time. So we see where it goes.
Well, that is a lovely wrap up for our conversation. And Mike, as I said at the beginning, and stick with, you were always lovely to chat with about any of these topics. And please let everyone know where they can go to find out more about you and what you do online.
Sure. My website, mikekuczala.com, and the last name always gets people. So it's KUC as in Charles, Z as in zebra, ALA. So mikekuczala.com. You can go there. You can go to Corwin and look me up at that publishing house. You can now go to Teachers College Press and look me up there. So I also have another website for the fourth book, The Peak Performing Teacher. So if you go to the peakperformingteacher.com, you can also find some information about me there. If you're interested in the company that I work for, that's at thertc.net.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matty. Thanks so much for having me.